A dystopia warning, obviously. Is it going too far? I don't know. Nothing matters anymore, does it? I've been a bit quiet in recent weeks, and that's because I've not been in a very good place. And I'm not referring to mentally, I'm referring to Essex, or Britain, broadly. A lot's been going on though, hasn't it? And I've been storing my rage deep inside, ready to just... I'm going to do a very brief flashback to last week. All got a bit Enoch-y, didn't it? Do I think Starmer is ideologically aligned with Enoch Powell? No! Do I think a Labour PM should be sounding very similar to Enoch Powell? No. The problem with all of this, besides the fact that it's inherently not Labour, nor the change that everybody voted for, the issue with this is that it's yet another Prime Minister dancing to the mad tune of Nigel Farage. And it signalled a problem with Labour's broader rhetoric around immigration, which is manufactured hysteria, frankly, and a form of hyper-normalisation that they should not be continuing. It's not in their interests, it's not in our interests, it's not in the interests of the fabric of our society. Emulating reform when 7% of its voters have gone to Lib Dem, 6% to the Greens, only 5% to Reform, and 4% to the Tories is a mad idea. But look at the biggest percentage there. That's right, a whopping 17% lost to general disillusionment. I wonder why. Not only is he chasing those that will never vote for him, he's helping them by legitimising their rhetoric. It's basically Reform promo. And led to him getting roundly shafted by the very same press that he refuses to reform. Regulate. I can't even use the word reform anymore. There we go. That was worth it, wasn't it? It was worth alienating your core voter base. And not only that, after all that effort, they dropped a point in the polls. Yeah. Labour voters don't want whatever it is that Keir Starmer's doing, or was doing last week, because it's a bit of a whiplash sitch at the moment. Just last week, Keir Starmer's Twitter started to resemble Elon Musk on a K-binge. But what he needs to realise is he could go down to Calais and personally harpoon dinghies, and Reform voters aren't going to vote for him. Why? Because they don't think he really believes the racism, and neither do I, and that is somehow worse. Obsessively chasing Twitter likes by dog whistling the far right like your Twitter account has been taken over by twat GPT won't mean a thing if you're not a good enough con man. Most people just want policy that will help people, and it's very un-Labour to shit on the poorest, most vulnerable people in society. People voted Labour for change, for our public services to be improved. Nobody asked for the Labour government to drive away skilled workers that will help drive that improvement. And by trying to appeal to the type of people taken in by him, you are advertising his nonsense. Because he appeals to the type of people that don't want to see black people on the bus, who believe memes that say that Muslims are trying to ban Christmas. I have to say, the weirdest part of all of this was when Channel 4 News reported that Keir Starmer took only GB News to visit the Prime Minister in Albania. That doesn't mean that it was the only broadcaster or journalist there. It means that he specifically took GB News alone so that they could witness the Albanian Prime Minister pie him. And how did GB News handle it? Dimly lit telly for thick fucks. BTN News from V for Vendetta on a lower budget. The channel that is vehemently anti-Muslim but funded by Saudis. How did they handle it? Were they sympathetic? No, they weren't, funnily enough. Keir Starmer left red-faced as Albanian PM says he won't host Rwanda-style deportation hubs, which is a mad idea anyway. He called Rwanda performative, quite rightly. And then they got Robert Jenrick, the Pillsbury Fash boy, who painted over murals in case they might welcome asylum-seeking kids. Got him straight on to slag off Starmer, didn't they? Well, anyway, when Bad Enoch goes, and just to be clear, in light of recent events, I'm referring to Kemi, not Starmer, he's going to be in there like a rat up a drain pipe as leader of the opposition. Prime Ministers, presidents used to be chosen by newspaper owners. Now they're chosen by social media tech bros. And what's the common denominator? Well, they're billionaires, aren't they? Just briefly interrupting proceedings to let you know that despite a lot of you following me, you don't all subscribe to my channel. So click subscribe, follow, and put your little bell on. Put your bell on. So you can watch this bell end tell you that politicians are mostly utter You won't regret it. We all seem to suffer a kind of collective political whiplash as Labour started this week entirely differently to last week by daring to improve our relationship with the EU, which is vital to us in terms of security and economic prosperity. And this is how the papers reported it, obviously. They know their market, don't they? Their market are gullible flag shaggers. And it's headlines like this that make me appeal to Labour to go harder and faster to reverse Brexit. I mean, this might be a parody article, but it's not wrong, is it? Until you regulate them, this is just going to continue, isn't it? And that prick is going to continue to have a hold on any Prime Minister that isn't him. And if he becomes Prime Minister, I can't emphasise this enough. We're all f***ed. Oh, and then you've got people, blue Labour. Got old Maurice Glassman here, a so-called Labour peer and blue Labour founder, saying the Conservative Party has been destroyed and the same fate will befall this government unless it moves into the space the Conservatives vacated. Well, if it carries on as it is, it's definitely going to take the space that the Tories vacated. And what space is that? Political obscurity. And how did they get into political obscurity? By trying to emulate that prick, who, I hasten to add, was one of the very first people to use the new e-gates. Yeah, because he decided to fuck off to France when Parliament's sitting and miss the EU debate. Just the biggest changes since, Brexit to the EU-UK deal, but, he can wait, could he? To quote our Lord and Saviour, Danny Dyer, he was in Nice with his trotters up. His 9th trip abroad since the election, most of which were to America, so he could desperately try to touch Donald's chubby. Mostly donor funded, or working in one of his other 10 jobs. What kind of a mug do you have to be to buy whatever that prick is selling? Or to think that anything's changed since the days when he was an MEP? Do you know what he did when he was an MEP in Europe? Mostly aligned with and collaborated with far-right figures in Europe, barely turned up to any of the meetings, and reportedly, allegedly, gave our taxpayers money for doing that job to his mistress, because Christian values. Despite Labour going completely off-label, Badenoch still managed to miss a vital admission from Starmer at PMQs. When I was a kid, I went to see my little brother play, away football. He was playing a different school. The goalie was sick. He couldn't play. So my brother's team had no choice but to put the tiniest kid ever in goal. They lost 12-0. That tiny goalie looked like Peter fucking Schmeichel compared to Bad Enoch missing Keir Starmer stating that he was going to probably do a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Now, this policy is being touted as the primary reason right-wing voters will never vote for Starmer, when in fact the reality is they'll never vote for him because they want Nigel Farage to win, so they can go back to the good old days when you could shout racist slurs at people in the street. I have problems with the winter fuel allowance in the sense that the threshold was too low. Got no issue with means testing it, because I'm not being funny, but hashtag not all boomers, but that generation broadly, statistically, voted for Brexit and voted for consecutive Tory governments, flushing younger people's opportunities down the pisser. So rather than them donating it or spending it on wine, if they can afford it, of course they shouldn't have it. But then really poor pensioners shouldn't also be freezing their tits off. It was a sloppy policy, and they idiotically made it their first policy and thus their defining policy. However, on the economic front, some interesting dropped. And I am of course referring to Angela Rayner, original old school raver, and the Telegraph exclusive leaked memo that she sent to Rachel Reeves prior to the spring statement, urging her to change economic direction. I love Angela Rayner, and she has spent months looking like all the light has been dimmed out of her eyes, and who can blame her? Now, Rayner has said she did not send it to the Tory graph. Plausible deniability. But what she suggested was real Labour policy, as opposed to Rachel Reeves making spending cuts. In essence, it was focused on making the richer people pay more, which a lot of people are on board with, despite the Telegraph and the Times showing people standing next to their castle going, oh, we can't afford a new turret. The things Rayner suggested, like, I don't know, bankers having their profits taxed, scrapping the £500 tax-free dividend allowance, extending the freeze on the additional rate of income, bringing more people into the high earner tax bracket, It's things you love to see, isn't it? Rayner said that these measures would be prudent, popular, and not impact working people, whereas old Reevesy, no, she went ahead and decided to go full Osborne, circa 2010, austerity Mark II, claiming they're fiscally disciplined. Okay. Tories laid into it. People like Mel Stride claimed that this is just classic Corbyn policy. Yeah, whilst it might echo John McDonnell, it's actually more Gordon Brown. Now, people like Richard Tice, who this week bizarrely seemed to say that, I don't know, reform, stand for Sharia law, was obviously hostile to the proposals that weren't even put into practice. He thought it'd send a message that work doesn't pay. How the fuck would he know? Someone should tell the privately educated millionaire that resides in Dubai most of the time. Back here in the real world, NHS workers, student nurses, people on low incomes rely on food banks still. They're working. So are all the people that are claiming universal credit and having to get money from the state because their employers don't pay them enough. The employers that generally aren't taxed enough. Now, a lot of people are focusing on the divide in Labour as if there isn't already an obvious divide anyway. Starmer filled his cabinet with yes men and yes women who are willing to give the impression that this Labour government is virtually indistinguishable from Cameron Osborne because they think that's the only way they can sell to the public that they are fiscally responsible. What they need to realise is people don't care if the Tories starve people or freeze people because not only is every paper on their side, that's what they expect from those governments, and for some reason they bend over and bare their asses for it. All Labour had to do was be more Gordon Brown instead of being defined by the Machiavellian winter fuel allowance policy. It revealed a lack of political literacy on a fundamental level, which you wouldn't expect from a government, and frankly it's scary that we're getting it. And they remember that Gordon Brown had to redistribute via stealth, which leads back to, as all roads inevitably do in this country, to press regulation. Because this Labour government has actually done a bunch of good things. It's also done a bunch of very bad things. You're never going to get the good to cut through as long as you're allowing press bias, sensationalism dressed up as fact, opinion pieces written by people that are being paid by Tufton Street, papers that do not tell you that Richard Tice, Farage are all taking loads of money from oil donors whilst pushing an anti-net zero agenda. Now, Rayner's positioning herself as old school Labour here, which is brilliant. And I personally think there will be a reshuffle after the summer recess, and only then will we get an indication as to whether or not Labour has learned a solitary thing about all of this. Reeves will either be booted so all the terrible decisions can die with her, or they'll keep hold of her to capitalise on her unpopularity. I don't think the Rayner memo is so much a divide between Starmer and Rayner as a divide possibly between Starmer and Reeves. It's also possibly a temperature test to test the water to see whether or not they can get away with this. Newsflash, they're never going to in terms of media coverage until again they regulate. But in the public, quite popular. The worst element of all of this is that Labour's in disarray. They've only been in for 10 months and they don't have a clear vision to sell. Their advisors are deranged. The Blue Labour approach is political idiocy on every conceivable level. And we're getting to the point where Starmer needs to decide between his own position and continuing to keep McSweeney in post. Because McSweeney is fast becoming Labour's version of Dominic Cummings, a frankly intolerable misfit, working against the interests of the party with his own agenda, with pretty dubious credentials. His position is wildly unpopular broadly with the Labour base, and we're not talking about kind of like harder left-wingers, we're talking about moderates. At this point, Labour would be better off driving him to Barnard Castle and just fucking leaving him there. And the biggest problem facing Labour right now is whether or not they actually have the balls to govern like a Labour government. You can't go off your tits tweeting like Tommy Robinson one day and then the next day talk about realignment with the EU. They're all over the shop. And the only people that benefit from Labour being in chaos or chasing reform are reform. They've literally got nothing to lose by being themselves. Having an outward identity crisis whilst lacking unity within leaves you in a position where you have zero chance of uniting the public. Trying to be a populist when you're born to be mild results in polls like this. They should be capitalising on the fact that Kemi Badenoch is about as popular as an Anne Widdecombe themed jazz rag. They should be ripping him apart and his empty rhetoric, but they're letting him dominate them, and not in a good way, no. They should be all over the news every day. They should be doing a daily press conference where they outlined their narrative and their agenda for the day. Their comms are shocking. It's like their director of communications is Ian fucking Huntley. Why have power if you're not going to use it? No one likes a limp dick at an orgy. The public can see straight through it. Rhetoric matters more than facts in our modern, fever dream nightmare. Anyway, feels really good to get that off my tits. So until next time, don't shag flags. Don't have nightmares. Farage. And for the love of sort it out, Labour. Don't be twats. Don't get beaten by a chamois leather that looks like a ventriloquist dummy. Jesus.